Your life is a sacred journey. It is about change, growth, discovery, and continually expanding your vision of what is possible. I'm your host, Erin, certified recovery coach and yoga therapist, and this is Thriving After Addiction, where I teach you how to heal yourself from the inside out.
Hello, welcome back to Thriving After Addiction. This is Erin. So if you listened to last week's episode, you'll notice that sexy voice is gone. That's fine. I enjoyed it while I had it, but breathing is cool too. So, so I am recording this podcast right before I head to the airport. And I'm going to be meeting my girl gang there, right? Braden Techie Bombers. And we are going to Nolans to go watch the WIFTA champs. And I am super stoked. So from Friday to Monday, I get to spend time with my girlfriends and my teammates and just get to watch some high-level derby. It's really fun for me, as well as anyone who plays a sport and then gets to watch a high-level version of it, right? It just gets you all like revved up and motivated. And so I'm very much looking forward to that. And then also like girl bonding time is like super important. So last year when we took a trip, we just like got to hang out and kind of like different elements, and you get to see the dynamics of your group. And so it should be a lovely time. And I'm looking very much forward to it. So a couple of things. One, if you have been emailing Erin at erincoach.com recently, you may have noticed that I don't get back to you. Why? Because the domain, there is a little glitch in there, a little hiccup. We're working on fixing that. In the meantime, you can reach out to me, thriveyogafit@gmail.com. So again, thriveyogafit@gmail.com to say nice things, to ask a question, to inquire about retreats, and we should be getting Erin at erincoach.com back up shortly. So on that note, I am doing my yearly retreat 2019 in May. Enrollment is open for that. And if you're interested in that, you can go to thrivingafteraddiction.com/retreats. We have a private chef on site. We do a Reiki certification. We do yoga 2 times a day. I do emotional and coaching work the whole time. I teach you tools. You get to integrate them, and you get to meet me and hang with me for a couple of days. So all the hugs, all the love, and it's a very powerful experience. So we have 3-day options, and I always have people that stay the entire week. So if you have a lot of work to do, you might consider that whole week, but you can check it out on the website. Okay, so I have a couple of reviews to get caught up on I'd like to read for a moment. And by the way, I have 83 reviews. I'm looking to get 100 by the end of the year. So we have like a month and a half. So do me a solid. And if you haven't left a review, you can go to the podcast app, right? And type in the search bar, Thriving After Addiction, right? When you see that, you'll see my face, click on my mug, and then you can scroll down and see reviews. And there is an option to write a review. So thank you, Moo22. She understands. Oh, thank you. Brilliant podcast from JRAD 1989. Erin's podcast, Inner Work, is a game changer in recovery community. Listening to her wisdom through many topics is nourishment for the soul. You should absolutely have her podcast in your recovery arsenal. Her podcast is especially great for those in early recovery stages or any stage who are starting to thaw out and experience waves of emotion. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Her audible guidance constantly steers me towards a more authentic, sustainable version of myself. I'm currently working through her book, Thriving After Addiction. It is a great tool to utilize with her teachings, as it is organized with information to help you navigate your way to a more fulfilled and happier self. Erin, thank you so much for the great work you're doing. You're changing lives, and I'm so thankful to have found your podcast. It truly makes recovery and happiness and something more manageable than I ever would have thought before finding you. No, thank you. And I'll just read one more, but there is another lovely one that I will read next time. From Lizzie CI or CL32. I want to start by saying I have never wrote a review, ever. I'm a consumer of reviews and rely on them to find select things to bring into my life every day. And although I always feel guilty for never getting back to the consumer community, my experience with products or services was never compelling enough to take action and leave a review. Today that changed. Oh. I've been wrestling with an influx of personal growth changes for several months, actively seeking out various sources to support me and help me through this chapter of my life, but nothing hit home until I came across this podcast. Oh. Erin's authenticity and energy is more than a fresh breath of air. Her message is awakening, comforting, and inspiring all at once. I plan to share with close friends and family. Thank you, Erin. Oh, thank you guys. That really made my morning. So I'm going to go on to my plane just being all super smiley and happy. I appreciate you. And I share from my space of experience, from what I'm feeling. I try to be real, raw, and authentic. I share the happy times. I share the shitty times. So thanks for listening and sharing. Thank you so much. That means so much to me. One of the highest honors. All right, let's get to it. So today's podcast, Difficult Conversations and Belief Systems. So this podcast is inspired by some conversations I had with my boyfriend. So particularly we were having some discussions, and it was kind of going back and forth. And the discussions we were having was what I like to call 10-minute sweaty conversations, though sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter. It's just a phrase I use. But basically it's tackling some things that make you or both parties uncomfortable, right? Kind of like the elephant in the room. And my boyfriend is very wonderful at kind of okay, see the elephant over there? Let's talk about it. I'm pretty decent with that. I think he's a little bit better than I, which I'm grateful for because I'm learning. But there was an elephant in the room, right? And it was a difficult conversation to be had because it made both of us uncomfortable. But usually we're able to kind of hash it out and see each other's perspective and whatnot. This particular conversation, we found each other kind of not meeting with each other as far as verbally or understanding each other. It was kind of odd, and it's happened a slight few times. Usually we're pretty good communicators with each other, but this particular time is just yeah, it was one was speaking Russian and one was speaking Japanese. Of course, I would be the one speaking Japanese. So, but it was it kind of scared me a little bit because I just sort of had flashbacks from my first marriage where there was a certain point where it just felt like we were communicating or kind of speaking words at each other, but there was not understanding. And so, sometimes we're projectors of our past, and I like to go digging for that stuff, right? So that's not the case, and sort of clean up the real. But this particular time, I was definitely sort of caught up in that. So there's a layer of fear over my understanding, which, if there's fear, there's not love. And so I kept saying it feels like the love has been sucked out of our conversation. It didn't feel safe, right? It didn't feel like a safe space. And so we decided to kind of look at it from different angles. And by look at it, I don't mean that it was completely, our tones were completely soothing and comforting and nice. They were rather at sometimes heated and a little bit aggressive. And something that I found with me is that it's difficult for me to hear and comprehend someone when they're speaking a little bit more aggressively towards me. Now, just to be clear, he was not yelling, right? It was just a certain, there was maybe some irritation or annoyance in his tone. Or at least that's the way I perceived it. So we were still communicating like adults, right? But it wasn't at least from my perspective, super compassionate. Though when we talked about it later, there were a lot of words he said that were compassionate. But anyways, my point is that when I have had conversations like that in the past, it's been more of sort of a business setting, right? Because I own multiple businesses, or in a coaching setting where I look at things objectively. But, admittedly, I'm kind of leading, right? I'm holding space open and people crack open and they're vulnerable with me. I've had this experience a few times with coaching clients, and I hear them less is when there's some anger behind their words, specifically towards me. And sometimes that happens, right? Because as a coach, sometimes we uncover things, right? And I'll, sort of do that with as much compassion as I can. And there's like a wound there. And so sometimes people get angry, they get a little aggressive if you're touching on a wound. And so sometimes that happens, and then you hold space for it and try to be as objective as you can. That being said, I'm not made of stone, right? I have my own things going on. And so, most people have had the experience of maybe like their parents arguing and, very aggressive speech. And sometimes that can trigger trauma response, right? It can trigger your nervous system to go into that fight or flight. And kind of trigger you to disconnect from mind and body. And so I had noticed that during this conversation, I had to work really hard to like breathe and stay connected with myself and like feel. And to communicate clearly for me, I need to be able to drop in my body and feel safe, right? So I can have difficult conversations, but a lot of the times they're more productive for me personally when everyone's like super calm, right? And we're just laying things out. And if not, again, I have that tendency sometimes to kind of like, oh no, like somebody is displeased by me. Oh no, I'm not doing something right. All those belief systems come up. And those are things that I want to work on, right? So if anything in the world gives you a strong emotional response, right, whether it be positive or negative, it might be worth looking at. So if we look at it and it's like positive, like, oh, there was that thing and wow, I like really positive response. Like I feel like euphoric or blissful, like that's interesting. So for me, something, like speaking Japanese for me is like, like I just feel like waves of euphoria, which is very helpful as far as like being motivated to learn the language deeper. But it's interesting, and I kind of want to like explore that, right? Like, why does it do that thing? Oh, it's very satisfying for my brain. I like the way it sounds rolling off my tongue. It reminds me of Sanskrit, right? So there's different ways that it sort of like pleases me. And then on the flip, if I look at, things that, I have a like sort of visceral response to, a strong emotional reaction in a negative way, to where I like clench or shut down or something, that's also something I want to look at. And so during this conversation that was difficult, I was also kind of exploring and learning about myself, which is the best kind of relationship, right? And so we're both acknowledging that, we weren't really like getting each other. And we kind of like, as he would say, like put a pin in it, in which I'm, again, getting better at because I'm like, no, there's discomfort now. I want to talk about it now as far as compartmentalizing. I'm more of like, let's look at it now. Anyways, so we took a break. I looked at it and I thought about it. And there was one thing that he said, and that just sort of like flicked on the switch. And it was, you have to let me be human in the moment. And I thought about that because I appreciate rawness, right? Just like you do. I appreciate, full spectrum of emotion. That being said, I'm not used to dealing with aggressive conversations, right? I start to like tense up. And so when I thought about that, that there's different types of communicators, right? And a lot of times like people aren't going to communicate from a calm space, right? Or maybe it's a calm space within them, but the way that they sort of like project it, it like seems aggressive, right? And I want to be able to hold space for that, right? Because it's passionate, right? And it's beautiful. And there's important things that are weaved in there. And so when I heard that, it was like all of a sudden click, right? So he was probably saying other things like that, but that one phrase just, and then I was able to drop it in my body and I was able to really hear him. And it was like all of a sudden there was a belief system that was surrendered in my head. And I remember when it clicked in that moment, I went into the space of understanding and I dropped in my body and I said, I understand and I get you. And I think maybe this is something I'm working on, and basically kind of like said all the right things as far as like meeting him in the middle. And it was fascinating to me because I haven't had something like that happen in a while. It was like the ego broke for a moment, and there was some space, and I kind of wiggled into that space, and I was like, ah, yes, I see you. And so communication with people, adults, sometimes it can be like nice and calm and nicey, but other times it might be, depending on what's going on, right? People might be passive aggressive. They might be a little bit angry, irritated, sad. And so being able to hear them in that space, we have to be comfortable with whatever emotion is coming up for them. How are we comfortable with that? We have to be comfortable with it inside of ourselves. So admittedly, I think I've done podcasts a little bit on anger, but I think I'm less comfortable with that. I think the reason why is because it's not like necessarily yogic. There's certain ways that I feel comfortable expressing anger. Full contact sports is one of them. But I guess I maybe had this judgment that, being aggressive with speech is like there's violence behind it, right? There's some sort of, there's lack of love. And when I feel like there's lack of love, even if there is love, right? Because we love each other very much, my boyfriend and I feel unsafe automatically and I will shut down. That's an important discovery, right? As far as communication, especially with someone who is very full spectrum emotion, like my boyfriend. So, and it's important to be able to communicate because there's so much beauty in what we have. But if we didn't look at and work on, some of our communication styles, then it would, it might not work out long term, which would be a damn shame because it's something so beautiful. It's like, taking a step back and understanding people, where they're coming from, right? Maybe their culture, right? Everybody's culture is different as far as like where they grew up, right? What they were around, their belief systems. And so being able to take a step back and notice what triggers you and being able to like, yes, why is this triggering me? And then, having difficult conversations, even when you haven't sorted them out fully, that's another thing. So for me, I like to, if there's something that upsets me, I like to kind of like pull back for a moment and kind of sort myself out, right? And kind of like really feel, because again, I have to really make contact with my body, right? That means like feel. And if there's confrontation, depending on where I'm at with my self-care, how I feel, hormones, I might kind of automatically disconnect. I've gotten better with staying in the moment and communicating, but if I disconnect, I need to like sort of like ground myself again before I proceed. And that's something that, I need to do. And some people can misinterpret that as like checking out. Some people can misinterpret that in different ways. But I guess my point here is that everyone has different communication styles. Everyone has different belief systems, right? As far as, okay, well, like we need to figure this out now. I'm a type of person that wants to figure it out immediately. I just want to grab the bull by the horns, so to speak, and like kind of tackle it. Not everybody's like that. And being in a different relationship, I have to sort of accept that and kind of work with it. But it's good because it's challenging me, right? It's breaking my patterns. And then also my belief systems that, if it's not dealt with like right here and now, that it's going to be a problem and we're both just going to like feel disconnected. Not necessarily. And so it's fascinating and interesting to be in this space and kind of like learning about that and just like different ways. And so we're teachers for each other in a good relationship. we learn about each other, right? We learn each other's quirks. We learn each other's pleasures, right? We learn each other's cravings and aversions, and being able to accept that and kind of work with it, even if it's, of course, unfamiliar, even if it's uncomfortable, being willing to go into that discomfort and explore it and see, like, why does this make me uncomfortable, right? Is it something in the presentation of what they're saying? Is it the particular words? When we talk about this particular topic, why does it bother me? What's in there? It's a great chance for discovery. And if you have an awake partner, which is wonderful, then you're able to hold space for each other to do this. Because, ultimately, if there's, the 10-minute sweaty conversation, the result that you want to go for is like understanding each other, right? Not a right or a wrong, not a I win or like you lose or whatever, but more like, hey, like I love you. I want to understand you. And so let me kind of take a step back and maybe look at where you're coming from. So sounds basic, but sometimes as adults, we can, forget the basics, right? Sometimes it's always good to go back to the basics, just like in yoga, chaturanga, up dog, down dog, right? Standing tall, plugging in our joints properly, basic stuff, right? But that you would learn in yoga teacher training, which I'm doing one in February. If you're interested, reach out, thriveyogafit@gmail.com. But it's always good to go back to the basics so that we can learn about ourselves and learn about each other and evolve and love more fiercely, love deeper, and be happier. And sometimes it's hard to like look at belief systems because they're deep, right? They're so deep in there. Sometimes from infancy, and we carry them all the way to adulthood, and we don't even know they're there. It's just something that you do, right? It's something that you've been taught that was unquestioned for your entire life. And then as an adult, as an aware adult, sometimes those things come up and you're like, why do I do that? That's not very productive. Why do I shut down when we talk about certain things? Why do I clench my body? Why do, I react that way? So being able to objectively pull out belief systems, remembering that you're not your mind, you're not your body, you're not your thoughts, you're the consciousness that pulses below the surface, makes it easier for us to pull those things out and just look at, oh, okay, like I was raised with this is the thing, but it doesn't necessarily define me. If we can have that attitude in approaching belief systems, which is what I do as a coach, takes some practice, and it also takes separation again of you're not those things that are impermanent, right? You're that permanent pulsing consciousness that is connected to all the other consciousnesses. When you can recognize that, it makes this self-study work, svadhyaya, much easier. So I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. Kind of a quickie, but actually looking at the time, maybe it's not. It's I have a tendency to go around 24, 25 minutes, and that is the trend today. So again, if you've been reaching out to me, rather than using the Erin at Erin Coach, please use thriveyogafit@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. I need 17 more reviews. So if you're holding out, if it's a pain in the ass, totally get it. Do me a solid. I love you. Write a review. It doesn't have to be long. But I do appreciate the long, heartfelt ones. 17 by January 1st, what I'm shooting for. And yeah, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, you just want to like talk a little bit and just say, hey, thriveyogafit@gmail.com. That's my studio's address, and hopefully we'll get the other email address up soon. All right, I think that's it. I hope that you have a fantastic week. I know I will. I'm going to have some fun in Nolans, and then I'll tell you all about it next week. So take care and namaste.
Thank you so much for tuning in. It is my honor to share my tips and insights with you on how to live life fully after addiction. If you haven't already, please claim your free gift, thrivingafteraddiction.com/free-gift. And if you haven't already left a review on iTunes, please consider doing so. Namaste.